Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 5 of the Queen's Cross podcast. I am your host, Alex, and your co-host, Shiloh, is right over there.
Yep, I'm your co-host, Shiloh.
Sorry about that. I did something completely different than we normally do, but at the same time, I just didn't know because we have a guest here. But our guest today is Matthew Edmonds.
Hello, everyone. Glad to be joining you today.
And we're glad to have you here, Matthew. I certainly have been anticipating talking to you for a while because it's we've never met before, but yeah, hopefully one day we'll meet on the ship as well. So that'd be really neat.
Absolutely.
But yeah, folks. So we've got quite a podcast for you today because we've got some interesting topics to discuss. But first, we will get into Queen Mary news, and there really isn't anything much to discuss this week except the fact that they've begun demolition of the old London town area just nearby the ship. Does anybody have any, do you know anything about the history of it? I don't even know when it was built. Was it built at the same time as when they opened the ship as a hotel?
Roughly. I mean, I believe they built it in the early mid 70s. And the idea was to create that sort of quintessential English village atmosphere near the ship. They had shops in all those buildings initially, and I'm not exactly sure what would have killed interest in it, but that was the idea. It was a really cute spot if you look at the pictures of it originally.
Yeah, I remember being there as a kid, and they still had some of it, probably, I don't know how much of it was left, but probably just the amount that's left right now, but it was an interesting little place. It was something kind of out of like a Disney park or something, it was an interesting little place. But yeah, it definitely, since it has become abandoned, it's become kind of an eyesore, and it's just been rotting away and collecting graffiti. So I think demolition is honestly the best thing to happen right now. But do you guys anticipate that there will eventually be some kind of entertainment and dining district that will replace it someday in the future?
Well, I think it's really a sign of shifting interests. My thought on is I think people go to the area of the Queen Mary to see Queen Mary, and it's having something next to the ship. I mean, they need that space right now because the old convention center that's down in the gutted engine room and boiler room 5 of the ship is currently closed. So they don't have space for big concerts and conventions and such. So they need the parking lot real estate for that. And so I think we definitely could see an outdoor movie theater, kind of like a drive-in movie sort of thing. I definitely think that it needs to be beautified a bit. But I would ultimately say I don't think we need to have another village, because people don't go to Queen Mary to see an English village. They go to see Queen Mary. And while that's sad for the village, I think that's actually a good sign for increased interest in Queen Mary herself.
So yeah, so that's it for the news. Honestly, I don't have anything else, but we might as well get right into the main topic, which is ideas for how they could redevelop certain areas of the ship. And I don't want to be the first one to go on this one. So does anyone want to kick off the conversation?
You want to go, Shiloh? If not, I can jump in.
Sure.
You and I were talking about it a little bit earlier.
Yeah. I think my number one spot for the ship to be redeveloped is the main lounge in terms of the usage during the daytime. We've discussed it before, both of you I've discussed with, in terms of bringing furniture back and having it to the sides of the room. So there's always furniture there to lounge, but you can use the center space of the room for either events or even tours, so the space is open so you can walk around. But to have some kind of activity in the room would probably be key, because it keeps the room open, but it also ensures that it's not just wide open without supervision, having whoever walks in there do whatever. When you have structured activities in the room, that implies that you have people running those activities, which then in turn kind of serves as eyes on the room. So that's a room that I think that people want to see, and that people kind of get upset when they go to the ship, and for whatever reason they can't see that room because there's an event there, or they're doing whatever, or it just didn't work out that day, where the room's closed. But or another thing too is they didn't realize that they needed to go on a tour to see that room, and to have that room open to actually use for what the room was built for doing, I think would be a major step in the right direction.
I agree, because I think that right now, I think management probably looks at the ship and goes, well, look at how much square footage on the ship that people can walk around without requiring a tour. They look at the promenade spaces and stuff like that, and they go, that's a lot of square footage that people have free roam over. But one thing that they don't really see is that the only Art Deco spaces that you can see without a tour, added on to your admission, is the main hall and the observation bar. Other than that, every other room is completely sealed up, and these are the rooms that are advertised, on the internet and stuff. And people say, look at this Art Deco ship, and not only do you have to pay admission to get on the ship, but you don't even get to see those Art Deco spaces. And one of
those
them,
are the most popular spaces on the ship right now. I mean, look at how packed the observation lounge is every evening. And main lounge, people immediately gravitate to it as soon as they get on board, because they like that time capsule atmosphere. And you're right, there is a lot of square footage on the ship that you can see, but is it necessarily that time travel back to the 1930s, 40s feel? Not really. So I think that I would definitely love to see the main lounge restored. I think of all the rooms on board, it has that, that wow factor. The issue is, I think definitely the woodwork needs to be refinished. The lighting, half the lighting in that room doesn't even function anymore. In terms of furniture, the issue there is payroll for people to move the furniture around as the room's use changes. Because, like Shiloh said, you could have some furniture in the wings of that room. That's really how that room was designed to be used. You had the dance floor in the middle, then you could have chairs and couches out at the outer edges where people could sit down and chat with friends and such. But the main thing is that room still needs to be used for large events. That brings in a lot of money for the ship. So I don't think we could, as much as I'd love to see it, I don't think we could practically expect that room to be actually fully furnished and restored as a lounge, because they need it as an event space. Now that could definitely be beautified. It definitely could use some sprucing up and such. And there's things that can be done.
Yeah, they definitely need, because for one thing, the thing that will attract a lot of people to the ship is having events throughout the day. There needs to be a reason for people to be on the ship besides just exploration. Some people really, it's sad to say, some people who visit the ship, they don't know what to expect, but what they don't want is to be in a museum. Some people just want to go there and they're curious to see what they'll find, but it's those people who would really benefit from having some kind of events or entertainment happening on the ship, because that's something that they'll like. If they're not there for the history, then they might be there to be entertained. And so I think, having the main lounge open for that. And plus, it's a massive room. Your jaw drops when you enter it. And most people would never guess that kind of room is on such an old ship.
Well, it kind of sneaks up on you too. You're not expecting to see it. And what I loved is when I was on for New Year's, it was right after Christmas of 2023. They actually had the curtains pulled back on the promenade deck windows for that room. So you'd be walking along the promenade deck, and then out of the corner of your eye, you'd see this magnificent room peeking out between the windows. And there are all kinds of people going up to the windows and looking in that room and going, "Oh wow." Because it still impresses people, even without furniture in it, even with the lights down, it still impresses people. And I think since then they've closed the curtains and whatnot. But even just doing something like that, just opening that up so the natural light comes in, so that people it raises their curiosity. Oh, how do we go in there? That's an important little thing.
Which actually this kind of transitions into my first space that I would recommend, besides the main lounge, of course, but would be the long gallery, because for the most part, it's still there. It's still got all its wood paneling. It's still got, the two paintings are there, but the room has been divided up by several temporary walls. I call them temporary because, I mean, technically, if
like
removing
G-Rock.
them won't cause any damage, you know.
Yeah.
They actually were very smart in how they divided up that room, so that way it could be, the walls could be knocked down and the room could be reused once again. But to have that long gallery restored, and not just for, you know, aesthetic purposes, but they could, the midships bar that they used to have in there, they could make that the new coffee bar, and then seating and stuff in that room could be used for people who are dining at the coffee bar, or people who are waiting kind of as an anteroom to Chelsea's Chowder House. And so it would be a great place for people to kind of sit and relax. Again, you know, if you're going to Chelsea's Chowder House, you got a couple of chairs by the front door of the restaurant, but it's not a very interesting space. So I think having the long gallery back as an anteroom, as well as a coffee bar to help make money, I think would be really interesting. And you could transition from the main hall into the main lounge, and then into the long gallery from there. So
yeah, you get that continuation of fabulous room after fabulous room when the ship was built, because you had all those doors connecting the rooms together. You walk from one room to the other, unlike today where you have to go out into the promenade deck, boardwalk first, and then walk along and then go into the next room. The room's all interconnected through foyers. And I think you're really onto something there, because I was talking to Shiloh about it earlier. You know, the aft third of the long gallery that's been separated off, I think it's like the regent room or the board room now or something like that. It actually has a door that joins it directly to the aft first class staircase. With a little bit of restoration work, and by restoration I mean just cleaning it up and some flooring, not heavy restoration even, that would allow hotel guests to go straight up that staircase and right over into that room. And you could either have it still be separated off, or you could be a part of this whole midships lounge for hotel guests to use. And it's got wonderful lighting. You got those big tall windows looking out over the promenade deck. You could refinish that and have it be a luxury lounge for hotel guests. And it's right there. It's easy access. And it's a small room, so you could restore it easier than you could say like the smoking room. I've advocated for years that the smoking room should be restored as a hotel guest lounge. But I mean, I understand that's a big room. You know, it's hard to restore a larger room and you lose the revenue of renting it out. But a smaller room like that boardroom or regent room, I don't think they'd really be missing it in terms of revenue. Now, I mean, I'm not an expert. I mean, the catering managers on board could really tell you this or not, but just in my 20 years roughly of visiting the Queen Mary, it seems to me like these rooms are used less and less in recent years as virtual business meetings have taken over. You have fewer, it's not conventions, but what's the word? Conferences, fewer business conferences being held in those rooms. So they're largely unused now. And that's where, you know, the Queen Mary evolves, right? Her original use in the 30s, people loved ballroom dancing, so they had the ballroom. Well, that fell out of favor, so they turned it into a smaller room and then eventually a shop. The ship evolves as society evolves. And society has evolved again here in the 2020s. So I think it's time for the ship to evolve a little bit with it and to take advantage of that. And I think there's revenue that could be had in that.
Yep, I 100% agree. And in fact, I was thinking about how, you know, when you book a tour, they tell you meet in the starboard promenade, right?
Yeah,
and you're just kind of you're just kind of standing around. There's nowhere to sit. And people who are trying to walk through the promenade, you're getting in their way. I mean, even sometimes they have them wait on the portside promenade, and then you're definitely in the way of traffic. And I always thought, I'm like, you know, when I worked at Disneyland, when we had our guests waiting for the tour guides, they had a tour garden. So you would go in there and there was all these chairs and it was a beautiful little garden area, and you'd sit down and you wait for your tour guide to come collect you. And I thought, why isn't there a room like that where people could kind of sit down and relax before their tour starts? And that was one of my ideas for how they could use the smoking room, was as kind of a where you book your tours, as well as where you can wait for your tours to begin, and then maybe they'd have like a little gift shop in there as well. But yeah, I mean, but yeah, I do have to agree that it would be difficult to convince them to utilize that room for that purpose. It's one thing like to
revenue in it. That's how you convince it has to be. Unfortunately, the Queen Mary runs on money, and you just have to work within that.
Yep. So, yeah.
What you were saying about a tour room, they kind of have. When you take the VIP tour, which I went on last September, they have you gather in the main hall, but you watch a preliminary video in what used to be the shipyard gallery. It's that the middle funnel hatch on promenade deck, right in front of the lounge there. So it's like, okay, well, you could use that as like a tour gathering area. Put some nice couches and chairs in there.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's not an original space, but it could still be used to give that premium experience to people that you were talking of.
Yeah, that's true. That would be a great way to use that space, and it wouldn't be empty all the time when people walk past it. So, yeah, because one of those things about the ship's success is you've got to make it look busy, and I always felt that Promenade, the deck itself was meant to be kind of like the center of activity on the ship, and so the more Promenade spaces that you open up and utilize, the better, I think. So.
Yeah.
Any next ideas for a restoration of a room?
It'll be interesting to see what they do with the second class smoking room, because I had heard that was going to be the new art gallery, and right now they have that in the drawing room, but maybe the plans are to move that, because the wedding chapel is hardly used anymore. People tend to do outdoor weddings now, or themed weddings, and that room, once again, it needs to evolve to pay its way. So I wonder what they're going to do with that space now, but maybe that could be the lounge you were talking about, because that room is largely intact.
Yeah, I had heard a couple of years back that it was going to be the artifact exhibit, and then they instead used the smaller former shop. I don't know what shop it was, but the one that's on Promenade, right off the Promenade. You know where it is
the
now.
Drawing
anyway.
room.
Yeah. So yeah, they use that space now as the artifact exhibit, the archive museum, as they call it. And so, yeah. So it is kind of a tight space. So I don't know. But yeah, that second class smoking room really needs to have something done with it, because it's just, it's not enough. But
it's unused potential.
Definitely, and on such
make money.
Yeah, and on such a busy deck of the ship, it's having these empty spaces, just it doesn't look right, So, but I would say another space I think that could definitely use some kind of restoration or reuse, I really think, is the veranda grill. And yeah, the reason why is because they want to have a fancy restaurant like Sir Winston's, but Sir Winston's has caused them kind of trouble because it's no longer ADA compliant. It's hard to get to, and overall it's way up there. You have to go out to the outer decks to get up top, and then it's just a mess. And the thing is that they have a staircase that is, that can take you up to Veranda Grill. They have a abandoned lift that could take you up to Veranda Grill. And so if those were allowed for guests to use, and restoring the lift as well, they could bring people out to Veranda Grill and use that as the premier restaurant on the ship. I think the only thing that Sir Winston's really lends is the fact that it has great views of the harbor and stuff, but Veranda Grill has great views as well. So
yeah, it's only a 10-foot difference. You're already I do disagree a little bit with you. I definitely want to see the Veranda Grill restored, but I don't think a 5-star fancy restaurant is the way to do it. I would like to see the Veranda Grill restored actually as a high-class, sophisticated 30s nightclub. because the observation lounge closes at 10 o'clock and it's always full. And then you have all these people that still want to party. Where do they go? They go home. All right. If you kept them on board, they would still spend money. So just say, okay, all the observation lounges are closing. We're going to go the opposite end of the ship now, because the exclusive nightclub is opening. And I'm not talking 20 speakeasy vibes. That's been worn out. All right. It's time for 30 glamour. You could have that there. And I mean, yeah, you can have food served too, but I'm just saying it needs to be a different atmosphere, I think, than Sir Winston's, because Sir Winston's was certainly fancy, but it was almost a stuffy, formal fancy, in my opinion. And I think that Veranda Grill could have that light, airy 30s glamour that people are really nostalgic for. You know, they watch the classic Hollywood movies, and you could live that, and it's the real thing. You know, we're talking the most exclusive restaurant in the world for 30 years was the Veranda Grill. And I think, you know, you have it open at like 10 o'clock and it closes at like 1 a.m. I really think that it would be a premier spot for not just people staying on the ship, but for locals, because it's a lot of locals that go to the observation lounge every night. Now the question is, go to a 5-star restaurant elsewhere if it's not there. Well, you know, maybe you do that. You know, you've got the Victoria room, then the King's View room that are adjacent to the smoking room on Promenade Deck, right there after Chelsea, and it has great views. And you could potentially share off that kitchen as well. So you'd have all three of your restaurants, your casual, your mid-level, and your fine dining, all there on the starboard promenade.
Interesting. These are definitely takes I haven't heard before, so I like it. Shiloh, any ideas?
I was going to bring up the veranda, because me and Matthew were talking about that, and you know, I certainly like the idea, and I think that would be very profitable for them. But in terms of like another idea for another room, I mean, obviously we can't have the overflow lounge back again, but maybe something redeveloped in that space.
It's unused real estate. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You know,
I mean, you could recreate something streamlined, modern, or Art Deco in that room that fits the ship, but it's new.
You know, I was thinking that the more the ship becomes popular, the more they're going to need a place for, you know, kids and teens to hang out while, you know.
That's what they used that room for originally.
Yeah. I mean, you know, so I'm like, you know, it'd be cool if they did something, you know, that looked somewhat original, but then the use of the space was completely different. You know, it was more of an entertainment place for, you know, kids and stuff to hang out. Especially because you see a lot of kids on the ship, and granted, a lot of them are ship fans. Kids love the Queen Mary, but then you got the kids who are there and, you know, they're bored. They don't know what to do with the place, and, you know, and so it'd be interesting to see if they would create a place like that for the kids. So, but yeah, it seems I'm not the first person to think that, you know, that there should be a place for kids and teens to hang out on the ship when they're not, you know, taking tours and stuff and doing the boring adult stuff, you know. So, but yeah, it's kind of a spot I thought about.
Sun Deck would work well for that. You've got all that, it was former first class cabins up in there where they had the Diana exhibit for a long time, and you could build pretty much whatever you wanted up in there. And you're right next to the tea room as well, which I mean, it's a beautiful room. I like the tea room. And, you know, people show up to do the brushes and bubbly. That's a popular event. And you know, you've got like a children's room just aft of that. So it would be a good location, I think. Plus, you've got the elevators that access it. You could also build a 1-star restaurant up there.
You know, I think Sun Deck, they should build more hotel rooms up there, like suites and things like that, because they've got all the space for it, and a lot of that used to be cabins anyway for first class. And so I think that they could utilize some of that space to build some really nice suites and things, because granted, they don't have all their hotel rooms open right now, but eventually when they do, that's it. That's the finite amount that they have. And if they wanted to add more on, let's say, C deck or something, their plumbing doesn't go all the way down there, because the way that they rebuilt the plumbing system on the ship in the 70s was that basically all of it gets collected from our deck and then goes down into the various systems and stuff. So you'd have to build a whole new system on C deck to make that happen. But Sun deck is available for that. They have the plumbing system hooked up there. So I think it'd be kind of cool. And then, those Sun deck cabins would have some amazing views of the harbor and stuff. I mean, granted, there are a lot of, the cabins do currently, but those are through portholes and things, and it's much harder to see. But with the large square side lights that a lot of Sun deck has, it would offer much better views. So
I think that has a lot of potential to it, because the ship's current cabins and suites, the nicer ones especially, are very nice, but there are people that want modern amenities. And if you try to build those modern amenities, like, the TVs are a big example of this. People demand the modern amenities of a television, but then if you get historic people like us who want to stay in that room and not have the TV, well, you're trying to be a jack of all trades and you end up being a master of none. So by having modern suites up there on Sun deck, you could make the original, let's say the main deck special staterooms, you could make those more authentic, original. And then the thing about this is whenever someone books a room, the front desk would just have to be very diligent, asking that guest, what kind of room would you like? And this is something I talked to Steve Coloca a little bit about last time I was there. It was actually his idea. He wanted to make the main deck and some of the A deck rooms, the original special staterooms on board, more authentic 30s, 40s. And he wanted to take some of the A deck and B deck aft staterooms, the former second class rooms, which there's virtually nothing original about them. There was 2 or 3 rooms that had been combined together. You basically look like you're in a modern Motel 8. I mean, that's a little bit harsh sounding, but it just looks like a modern hotel. It's nothing special. Yeah. He wanted to renovate those mid-century modern. And he says you could have televisions in those because, TV was a big thing in the 60s. And so I think having a wide variety of rooms to fit different tastes would be fantastic. In the Sun deck, you could have, I don't know if it would be Art Deco necessarily, but you could have wonderful rooms with like whirlpool tubs and all of that modern stuff that would really bring, I think she's only like a 3-star rated hotel right now. And if you had some of those rooms, it could potentially add on a star. And that's an important thing when people are looking at like TripAdvisor. If you're taking a trip to Long Beach, you're looking, okay, we only want to shop, 4-star hotels and above. You set your filter for that. Queen Mary's not even going to come up. So I think that is a brilliant idea.
Yeah, it's interesting what you were saying about how there should be cabins, that are modern, ones that are, that are mid-century modern, and then the original 1930s-esque kind of cabins and stuff. And I always thought that too, because like you were saying, there are people who visit the ship and you read these in like Yelp comments and stuff like that, and people are like, oh, it's so old, and so, they don't get it. They don't, it doesn't click in their head that this is a historic hotel. You're here for history. And the thing is that you'll never be able to shut those people up. They're gonna come to the ship all the time. They're gonna make their mistake of booking a room, expecting to see a modern room and not getting one.
Right.
And they can't live without their modern amenities, whereas like you said, people like us, we love the history. We love to stay
away from the modern.
Right.
That's where we go to escape it. Yeah.
It's a
and if those people had modern rooms to stay in somewhere else on the ship, that leaves more of those historic rooms open for people like us who would actually appreciate the historic rooms.
And you could make them more historic.
Yeah, you can make them more historic. So, I completely agree. And, one of the things that is interesting is a lot of the fans of the Queen Mary don't really agree with us on that. A lot of them are like, no, everything's got to be, the whole ship is historic, so you got to keep the whole ship historic. And I think that's one of those things where people sometimes don't understand that a historic place has to make money, and you can put as much history as you want, but there's a certain threshold where you have the average visitor who might enjoy seeing history, but maybe doesn't want to stay in history. They want to be on the ship, but they don't want to be without their big screen television. They don't want to be without their whirlpool tubs. They don't want to be without, the fancy, shiny, chromed, stuff all over the room. And then some of them don't even like the wood paneling. I mean, this boggles my mind, but there are people who compare the wood paneling to 70s office room paneling, and I'm like, it's not even the same thing at all.
Not mass-produced printed garbage. Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
But those people, they don't see the difference, and so those people will always come to the ship. You can't stop it. So you might as well build something that will appeal to them and get their money and use it for the restoration of the rest of the ship. So. Oh yeah. Yeah.
Oh, I understand completely. I mean, I'm a purist when it comes to Queen Mary. I would wish that every square inch of that ship was authentic to 1936, but I'm also a realist. That's not practical. She would never make money. Cunard tried. Okay, they tried to keep her along as long as they could. They made changes as they went. The world changed. She had to change with it, and that's the beauty of the Queen Mary, is she's still here doing largely what she was built to do. I mean, she's not sailing, but she's still hosting people, which is her primary purpose. And she has to change and evolve to do that. We just need to not lose her soul in the process.
Yeah. There's nothing wrong with putting a little bit of modern here and there, but also maintaining that you add back historic places that once were removed and stuff, so you can there is a way to maintain a balance. It just takes a creative eye to be able to see it,
And like I said, you've got a variety of different rooms on board. You've got, the modern experience, you've got the historic experience. That's where you've just got to have a really diligent hotel booking staff that can almost like a car salesman, figure out what's the right type of car for you. What's the right type of room for you? Do you have kids? Do you like modern? Because if they mismatch, well, then you get a bad review on Yelp. So
what do you think of the people that are like, oh, they need to restore the third class rooms so people can stay in them?
I don't think anybody would ever really stay in them. I would. I think it would be great. I'd do it once, but then I'd go right back up to my suite on main deck. I think it would be great to have a couple of those rooms for display. Maybe you could book them specially if you wanted. I mean, that's kind of like B340, right? It's mainly a display, but you can book it. I could see that happening, but they would just have to be very, very clear. Like, hey, there's no private bathroom. You have to go down the hall for that. This is an authentic experience. Almost sign a disclaimer. Please don't gripe.
Yeah.
But it's just not really practical to restore a whole block of those for actual hotel use.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the original third class rooms really weren't that decorated. They looked very utilitarian in comparison. So, I think that a lot of those people that they want to see those third class rooms brought back so people can experience what it's like to be in third class. And it's like, no, the minute you tell them that they're going to have to share a toilet with a bunch of other people in the nearby area, they're going to be like, nah.
Yeah.
I mean, I think what would have been a great opportunity. There was a short hallway of second class cabins on our deck, right off the main foyer there. If that little short hallway of a few dozen rooms had survived, well, you could run tours through there. Same thing on our deck, third class, right off the foyer. There was only like 3 or 4 third class rooms that were off of that, right up there by where the purser's desk was. If a few of those rooms had survived, just a little short hallway of them, that would be a great historical display opportunity. And that could be rebuilt, but I just don't see it as people actually being able to stay there.
Yeah, actually, I was just going to talk about that. That would be another place that I would say should be restored is the Ardec third class foyer. If they were to open up the starboard wall, that there's a white wall there. If they were to open that up, yeah, you would have access to the area that is nearby to the old purser's office. You'd have access to the area that's nearby to the old cabins. Like you said, there was only a handful of cabins on that deck, but that's enough for a tour to go through or for people to see, and you can get that little bit of third class experience by walking past it, looking at it, taking pictures and all that kind of stuff. And you would get to see the car of the third class lift. So you'd be able to peek in there and, if that thing was lit up and dusted, because it's really dusty. Those are some
trouble.
Yeah, and then of course you would see part of what the front of the restaurant looked like, But one thing I know that people talk about a lot is the restoration of the third class restaurant, to which, I don't know about you guys, but I definitely am against. I'm like, the third class restaurant, I don't think really is a place that could be used today. I don't think there's anything because it's an odd shape. If you wanted to book it for let's say somebody's birthday party or a wedding reception, you can be in one side of the room and not see the other side of the room from there.
Yeah, it's kind of a horseshoe shape.
It's a horseshoe shape, There is an area where there was kind of like a stage for a band, but again, you couldn't see the band if you were on the far ends of the horseshoe. And that room also, it wasn't the prettiest room on the ship, it wasn't ugly for sure, but I just don't think that it's worth it. I don't think anybody would want to book it for anything. And I don't know what else you could put way down there, especially as an attraction or whatnot. It's just so far down there.
Yeah, it's pretty well isolated now. And I mean, you could use it as like a casual dining restaurant, but I do have a hard time seeing it being a revenue generating space. And it would take so much restoration. The floors are shot. The paneling is heavily damaged. And the room's been subdivided so many times. The original Diners Club ideas for how the whole R deck of Queen Mary would look was basically the third class restaurant, the first class, and the second class restaurant would all be joined together with that walkway on the starboard side. You notice how you have that walkway now? It's actually where the old, I believe where the steward or perhaps purser's accommodation was. They have that walkway now from the first class foyer all the way up to the third class restaurant. They wanted to extend that all the way down the starboard side of the ship to join all of those dining salons into one big catering, eating space. And maybe something like that could be viable, but I mean, I wouldn't want to see that because you're damaging even more originality of the ship to do that. But yeah, I mean, I agree with you. As nice it would be to see that room utilized for something better, because 2/3 of it is storage right now. I mean, like the seance room, for instance. I mean, I'm not really into that, but at least it's cleaned up and looks good, and it actually works well for that purpose.
Yeah, I mean, I would prefer for that seance room to not be there. I'd prefer for it to be a miniature setup of what the third class, dining saloon would have been. There, a couple of tables and chairs and things, and and then maybe those plaster walls on either side could have big, portraits of what the port side and the starboard side of the room looked like from that point of view. That'd be kind of interesting. But other than that, I've seen the ideas for that walkway you were talking about, that, it goes from the third class dining room all the way to the second class. And I don't see people utilizing that. I see that, all that money being spent to restore those rooms and then nobody using it for anything.
Yeah,
You know,
and I wouldn't want to see it happen either, because it would be very destructive to put that walkway the whole way through. I was just using as an example the way that
Yeah.
that restaurant, the third class restaurant, could be tied in and maybe be a little more useful. But yeah, I could see it being a casual restaurant, but that's about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're right. No one's going to want it as a meeting space.
No.
Yeah, and it has such low ceilings in comparison to
Yeah.
you know, to the main first class restaurant and stuff. I mean, the first class restaurant, it works because it's such a huge room. Maybe you don't get views outside the portholes because portholes are. Yeah, you don't need it, but that room is huge. But when you go to the third class room or even the second class dining room, second class dining room looks nicer than the third class one. But neither one are really a space that looks grand. You know what I mean? It's nothing that that is scenery in. Right? Yeah, they're not scenery in and of themselves the way the first class restaurant is. The size of that room and the beauty of it itself is its own scenery. So, but yeah. So, is there any other spaces that you guys can think of that maybe should be?
I was gonna say that Alex and I had an idea a long time ago of if the tea room was not to be a tea room, that it could be the guest lounge for the hotel.
Oh yeah, the one on Sun Deck.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that could be a guest lounge for the hotel, and especially if you purchase, like, let's say an annual pass or something, then that could be a place that you are allowed to go and relax and stuff, because it gives people a bit of exclusivity that is kind of like a reward for for getting an annual pass and stuff. And then of course hotel guests, it'd be nice for hotel guests to be able to lounge somewhere without having to worry about running into the daily visitors who are, running around looking for ghosts and whatnot. But that was also another idea I had for the A deck overflow lounge, was maybe use that as a hotel lounging space where people could, watch, on big TVs and stuff, watch movies and things, play games or whatnot. Stuff you can't do in your stateroom because, your stateroom is historic, So, I don't know, just random ideas that kind of popped into my head. But, great, I got gardeners outside right when I'm trying to record this thing. Really? Okay, so anyway, I'm going to try to wrap this up because we've just gone over, we're just at 45 minutes of recording. So I think we shall move on to our Q&A. So 5 Caps Films 152 asks, is there any unsolved mystery about the Queen Mary, be it about an area or event aboard?
I'm sure Fox is just thinking of a specific one.
It can be an area or an event that the ship was involved in. Is there any kind of unsolved mystery or something that people don't know yet about the ship? And honestly, I've tried thinking of this for the last couple of weeks that question's been posted, and I can't think of anything.
Yeah, it's like overload.
I can't think of any. Oh, you know what? There is. You know what? Okay, there is an unsolved mystery. Nobody knows how many troops died on the ship during World War II.
Yeah,
that is true.
Actually, I think somebody does, and it'd be the British government, but they're not releasing the information. Yeah, I mean, 'cause they knew how many people got on the ship, and they probably took a tally of how many people got off, and there was a difference there. But as far as what I have heard is the British government has that information sealed, and they're not releasing it. So,
and I would think that it would have to be a pretty sizable number because if it was if it was like 3 people, I'm sure the government wouldn't really care. They'd be like, oh yeah, these are the 3 people that died on the ship during World War II. But it had to be a pretty big number for them to go, you know what, we don't want people to see Queen Mary as this ship
Yeah.
of death, you know.
Yeah.
So I believe the number has got to be pretty sizable. So that is the one mystery I can think of that is still surrounding the ship, is how many people died during World War II on the ship. You know, during storms, waves would wash over the decks, and there's stories of men being, you know, washed off during World War II. Like there was one man had commented in one of my videos that he was one of the people heading off to war in World War II on the ship, and that he saw a bunch of guys that were horsing around on the sun deck area. The ship was rolling like crazy during these heavy seas, and as one of the men was kind of, you know, joking around and horsing around with the others, he tripped and fell over the edge of the railing and plunged down into the ocean because the ship was tilted towards the ocean at that time. And then you know, everything quickly became somber because they knew that they couldn't just shout man overboard. The ship would never stop.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I've heard that story. And that makes me think about when the rogue wave hit her and she rolled over to 52 degrees. That shattered a whole bunch of glass on the starboard side. And I've heard stories where, you know, stewards would go into cabins after the portholes shattered. I mean, that glass is 3/4 of an inch thick. And when that glass shatters, it's like an explosion going off of these sharp daggers. I mean, they actually embed themselves in the opposite wooden bulkhead. So any people, and she was carrying troops, you know, those rooms were packed with people. You know, there were people injured. So I wonder how many people were injured or killed when that rogue wave hit her.
Yes, especially they would have had their cabin doors and everything shut. So when all that water came in, I mean, who knows?
It was a lot of water.
Yeah.
I
I'm
mean,
sure it
washed through the hallways.
Yeah.
Besides, the ship's going to be more horizontal than vertical. So all those guys that were in their bunks are now laying against the inboard wall on top of each other.
Yeah.
People got hurt, for sure.
Oh, yeah.
And we have no idea how many.
Yeah. Gosh, that's really, you know, every time I think about that, it just absolutely boggles my mind just how many people could have been. Yeah.
And you also have to think about the furniture that they did have, like like in the lounge, they had they turned that into a what was it, an
the main lounge
officer's.
was the officer's lounge.
Yeah.
Yeah, the furniture still.
And I mean, the furniture for the most part was bolted to the ground, but I'm sure there's stuff they had around that fell and collapsed on them.
Oh yeah. There's some mystery surrounding about how her departure from Rio de Janeiro during the war, I think that was during her 40 days voyage, where her departure was compromised to Nazi intelligence. You know, I'm sure there's some mystery around who was involved with that. I'm just trying to get away from the whole death thing.
Yeah. But yeah, so that's kind of our answer for that, and let's move on now to the trivia game. And so the way we do this is Shiloh and I usually I'll ask one question, then I'll let you guys answer, and then Shiloh will ask his question, and he'll let us answer, and you know, we'll go back and forth till there's 4 questions spoken. And at the very end, I give the audience their own question to answer at their own time. But I will start with my first question. We actually just talked about this. Dang it. In what year did RMS Queen Mary encounter the largest rogue wave of her seagoing career? Bonus points if you also know the month.
Well, I would say, you want to go first, Matthew?
I mean, it's just a wild guess, but I believe it was 1944. And I want to say it was like maybe October, but I mean, that's pretty much just a blank guess.
I'm going to say late 43, maybe like November.
Wow, you know, I really thought you guys would get this so quickly that I was like, I shouldn't even ask this because they're going to know immediately. But it was December 1942.
Oh, 42.
Oh, early. Okay.
Mhm.
Yeah. So, Shiloh, your first question.
This one's about Edward Wadsworth, the painter of the two paintings in the first class smoking room. So, besides from being commissioned to be an artist on board the ship, what other thing was he known for?
Oh, I think I know. He was a captain.
It's art related.
Oh, it's art related. Oh, okay. Well,
I
then,
would say it's art related,
no.
but it has to
sorry.
do with ships.
Really?
Hmm.
Art related and has to do with ships. I really don't know.
Do you know, Matthew?
Not specifically. I know that he was known for doing a lot of surrealist paintings, and not just the ones on Queen Mary. He didn't
Military
paint
vessels.
camouflage patterns, did he?
Hmm. He did.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
So yeah,
Oh,
he invented the dazzle paint scheme.
oh, for Olympic. Oh, I've heard this. Yeah. Mhm.
Yeah,
He's an
that's
Olympic
coming back
team
to
with
me
probably
now.
Mauritania's.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, and he also did warships too, battleships
Right.
and escorts and yeah.
It's pretty good. Yeah.
And he did surrealist paintings of those ships too in the dazzle paint.
Right.
Hmm.
That was a good one. That's a really
yeah, that
good
was
one.
a good one. Yeah. All right. So my second question to you both is: it's a true or false? Every lifeboat on Queen Mary was equipped with a radio transmitter. True or false?
I'm gonna say false
It's false.
because
Only
it
two
was
boats had radio transmitters.
the two accident boats.
Yep.
Yep, that is correct. It is false. Only
And-
two had it.
I think they had another amenity too, right? They had like extra something.
Well, they were all motorized.
Yes.
Well, you're talking about the accident boats. What extra they
Mhm.
had?
Hmm.
Um,
What they had to be more equipped though, because those are the ones that were being sent out if there was a shipwreck or something and they need to rescue or investigate something.
yeah.
So I think those would probably have. I'm sure all of them had it. But I'm sure they had extra flares and other such things.
Right. Neat thing is, all those boats, because they had diesel engines in them. If you've ever started a diesel engine in wintertime, you know they don't like to start when it's cold.
Yeah.
They had block heaters in them. They had an electric cord that plugged in. So in the wintertime, all of your seamen would go around and they'd plug in all the block heaters so that the engines were already warmed up. So that if there was an accident, the boats had to be launched, they would start right away.
Yeah.
One of those
Yep.
neat little technological things about the Queen Mary that you never hear about anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. And in fact, folks, if you want to learn more about the lifeboats or anything else on the Queen Mary, you can visit our website, rmsqmwiki.org. And that is where you can find all kinds of crazy, detailed information about the ship, even stuff that me and Shiloh can't remember off the top of our heads.
Yeah.
But it's all there. That was okay. So that was my final question. Did you do a second question yet, Shiloh?
No, this will be my second. What two commanders of the Queen Mary were able to dock the ship without the assistance of tugs?
I know one of them. Okay, I'll say. It was Commodore Robert Irving.
Mm-hmm.
He was one of them, but the other one, don't know.
How about you, Matthew?
Well, Robert Irving was one of them. Donald Sorrell was the other.
Yes, that's right.
Nice. All right, we win the grand prize. No, just kidding. But there is one final question, and this is for the audience to answer on their own time, and I will provide the answer a few hours after this video is published. I will put it in the chat of the this video. I can't think of what it's called.
comment?
Okay. Yeah, I had a complete brain fart right there. Okay, so the question for the audience is, it's a multi-choice question. RMS Queen Mary was the first ocean liner to A, have a synagogue, B, radio broadcast music mid-Atlantic, or C, be named after royalty? All right, folks, that does it for this episode of the Queen's Cross podcast. I would like to thank Matthew Edmonds so much for being a guest on our podcast. It's been really great having you, and you're a wealth of knowledge for sure.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, and Shiloh as well. Thank you for co-hosting this with me every week.
Of course, yeah.
And folks, you can find Art Deco merchandise that Shiloh and I design on our Printful store. The link is in the description below, and I'll probably put it in a comment section or something later on. But you can get all kinds of really neat stuff that we have designed, and so that's all I have for today. So thank you.
I was saying we have lots more coming.
And we have lots more coming, yes. There's lots more merchandise coming that we have yet to design, and it's going to be really cool. As time goes by, we'll have more and more complex and really interesting merchandise for you guys. So, but yeah, and again, check out RMSQM Wiki if you got any curiosity about the ship and just want to see some detailed information. Thank you all for watching, and we will see you all next time. Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.